The Champions Cup just wrapped up, and my goodness, what a total potential shit show, depending on how you view it, with one of the most controversial calls we will ever see in a major. Was it deserved? Let's get into that, as well as everything else you missed in Champions Cup. All right, so I know a lot of you are just here for the drama. Love it, totally understand. So we will get into that first. And if you like content like this and want to stay in the loop, be sure to subscribe. All right, so basically FPO came down to this one foot fault call. There's obviously a lot of factors that led up to it that I'll get into later, but for the TLDR, the only thing you really need to know is that it was a battle between Kristen and Missy, leading to this shot.
And the shot around the world was the start of the revolution.
All right, so it looks to be like a pretty normal forehand to just get a little bit extra fade, but really nothing too egregious, but you do notice that the disc slips a little bit. And right after that, you heard Kristen talking on coverage and you're like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And that is because she was talking to the marshal, basically because she was instantly given a foot fault violation. No warning, no nothing, no input from the card, no input from anybody. It was just an instant extra stroke at a moment where she could not afford it. And obviously she was pretty livid. It feels kind of arbitrary. It feels like, why is she given this call when there's not sufficient evidence that it actually did happen? It is just going to happen no matter what. We already have an Instagram post from Kristen. Not the first time I found myself at Champions Cup in a controversial situation involving the PDGA, and goes on to state how her daughter was removed as her caddy, and states that marshals do a very important job, but the way it is implemented needs to be reworked, at least for situations like this. Stating, when I asked the marshal if he was 100% sure the disc was still in my hand when it moved, his answer was that he couldn't focus on two things at once and couldn't see. But he is still 100% comfortable giving me the penalty stroke. No previous foot faults had been called in the round, and the timing felt very unfortunate. That said, I take full responsibility for letting it distract me. I know I wasn't the best player out there, which definitely feels like the most Kristen level response, where she's pissed, but she's trying to phrase it as like, it is what it is. And of course, you have people on every single side stating it could be one way or the other, with one person on the opposing side saying only disc golfers could cry so hard about an official making a correct call in a sporting event. And yes, I see that perspective, I'm not dumb. But having said that, we have gotten Kristen being targeted for her daughter, her step butt, now her foot fault. It feels like it is truly just Kristen getting these targeted calls. And Hunter brings up a very important point. The moment that you see the disc fly out of her hand, it is probably like 1/100th of a second before she actually throws the disc. It is such a tiny fraction of a second that to be 100% sure about a call feels just totally wild. With others stating, y'all are ridiculous with these takes, it was a foot fault. You think because you want a dramatic finish, the rule shouldn't apply? Obviously no. There is a ton of straw bans being put out there right now. And spoiler alert, Missy did win this event. And again, you have Hunter stating, really sucks for Missy. She played great all weekend and probably would have won either way. But now it'll always be tainted by the marshal getting in the way. And the general consensus about why everybody is so mad is that it feels like it was done in the most haphazard way. There was a lot of foot faults being done this entire weekend. I can point to Paige and Andrew, but they weren't called. There was absolutely no repercussions, which honestly there kind of shouldn't be. Unless other players on the cart are calling it, I just don't think the marshal should step in this situation. If there's uncertainty on the call, then yes, the marshal should definitely be like, hey, I agree with this or I disagree. And to go along with that, especially for a major, there needs to be marshals on every card making the calls consistently. If everybody in the entire event was given the same level of strictness, I would have no problems with this call. I mean, I would still have a little problems because I'm not 100% sure it was done in a valid way because he couldn't even see both the lie and the throw. But assuming that it was 100% valid, I would have no problems with this call. But it was not done that way. I don't know for sure, but I believe this is the only foot fault call made the entire weekend. I know I tend to be a little hyperbolic, but I truly do not think that there's been a call that has made more disc golfers mad than this very moment. But let's move on because there's so much more to this event than just the call. But damn, I still hate that. So dumb. So even though it was super controversial, the entire weekend was awesome. It was such a thrilling event to watch. Even though MPO was kind of a disaster with basically every top tier pro kind of just playing bad. At so many points, they just didn't have what it took to win. So first up, Jake Mon gets the insane throw in on 18. Are you kidding me? There could not be a more sick throw in on this entire course. Love to see it. Next up, Calvin, 12 under. Once again, Calvin does the most Calvin-esque thing. Why do you do this, Calvin? With that 12 under, he was in first place for a total of about 20 minutes. But again, how can he be so good in a major when it absolutely does not matter? It's just pointless. Damn Calvin, what could have been? So let's get to people that actually mattered, which was literally about 15 players at one time, with everybody hovering around 20 under at one point. With Presnell, Aderhold, Calvin, Tipton, Ricky, Adam, Burr, but one person is mysteriously missing from that list, and that is Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul.
with literally my last video talking about how I believe he's back, how I'm so happy to see this consistency, how he's playing so much cleaner, and then he just throws it right in the garbage. Having gone 14 under in the first round with a 1097, insane, and then follows it up with a 1 under through 3 rounds. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And it wasn't just that he had unlucky breaks, it was just a total disaster. And I know there's no reason to look at it this way, but if he did go 4 under, if he just averaged 4 under on the last 3 rounds, he would have gone into a playoff, leading to kind of a disastrous 16th place. I love my Vessies, but damn, probably not a great look. And my one honorable mention for the weekend is Sullivan Tipton. He fell short quite a few times in the back half of the final round, but damn, this has got to be one of the best finishes we have ever seen from him, with insane putts on 13-14, a great upshot on 16. His whole game is just so clean, his forehands are just pured every time. And I know a lot of people just think about him as the guy that aced at USDGC, but damn, so to see him get a 5th place finish is sick. But the players that were right under him were really the people that were in the mix, and that was Isaac and Marweed. Their putts were absolutely incredible, but Marweed kind of stole the show a little bit with his C2 putts, especially like an insane bogey save on hole 5, a par save on hole 13. There was no putt that was too much for him besides one, but we'll get to that later. But just like everyone else, there was a lot of bad shots. And man, I truly do not know what it is about this course, but there are so many times where they hit first available and I'm like, I really don't think I would do that. But this course requires so much power and there's a ton of wind, especially in the last 2 rounds. It was crazy that we were in a major and the leaders were not being major players, which is where your boy, a shark in the water, AB, comes into play. Despite choking on his drive on hole 7, he was playing a very fiery final round. And with him being on chase card, he was leading the leaderboard basically the entire final round. With basically every time the lead card went cold, he would hit another great shot, a great birdie, like especially on hole 14 and 15. And so at that point on 15, that is where we'll start the final round. Marweed is left with a 40-footer. And so Marweed is almost certainly looking at a bogey, but because he is literally the best putter on the tour right now, he jams in a 40-footer, putting him 2 strokes back of Isaac. And so even though I was thinking, yeah, Marweed's probably done, this is gonna turn into a bogey, nah, he just doesn't know how to miss. He does it like it's nothing. So Isaac only gains 1 stroke. And then immediately after that, he makes another crazy putt, basically a Simon line putt, parts it right into the chains for a birdie, putting him just 1 stroke back of Isaac. And I gotta say, Isaac's entire game has looked so clean this entire way through, but I feel like this course requires so much good shot shaping, which is his #1 expertise, and it shows. Whereas Marweed just throws really controlled forehands. I don't think there's any specialty that lines up perfectly for this course, so it really was just a matter of playing consistently and having a great putter. And right about this time is when AB throws his shot on 17 and he needs a birdie to be in contention. And then he hits the branch and gets a par. Still good, but he is only at 24 under. Now he does park the upshot on 18, which was amazing. And so it felt like there might be a little bit of hope for maybe a 3-way playoff. So we move on to hole 17. Isaac has a phenomenal upshot to the basket, and it looks like, okay, he's close, but not that close. Whereas Marweed is closer and his putter is looking dialed. But from an insanely far putt, very similar to Paul at Worlds in 2022, Isaac in literally 5 seconds dials in the putt with basically no emotion, because that is just what he does. He jams in the most important putt of probably his entire season like it is nothing. And then Marweed, who is arguably a much better putter from a much closer distance, falls short. And so even though it looked like Marweed is going to get a stroke on him, he actually loses a stroke, putting him 2 strokes above Marweed and 1 stroke above AB. Somehow, Isaac takes down Champions Cup again, making him a 4-time major winner. What the actual fuck?
The game was feeling good, but I just didn't expect to be able to take it down. I was checking scores kind of the whole round, just trying to keep pace with everyone else.
There was crazy wind. There were so many bad moments. Do you remember him in round 2 missing a very close putt and then being wildly pissed? This was such a war of attrition, with the 3rd lowest event rating of any event in the last 2 seasons. He's truly the major whisperer, taking down 4 of the last 9 majors since 2023. And so even though coverage talked a lot about Ezra, about Hammis, about Gannon, Calvin, it was all inevitable. Isaac was going to clutch up and win yet another major. He didn't have to play amazing because the course required just consistency again and again. With so much wind, and that is exactly what he did, only going out of bounds 3 times, whereas AB, taking 2nd place, went out of bounds 10 times, with also the lowest bogey percentage, only taking 6th the entire weekend, and honestly had some of the worst C1X putting, with only 78%. But hey, sometimes it is truly just a war of attrition, and he won this battle. So let's go on to FPO. This is really just a battle between 2 people. I'm going to talk about more people, but it really just felt like 2. So first up, Paige and Kristen took a 4-putt in the final round, with Kristen going 3 for 25 235 from C2. And even though it felt like Missy kind of had the edge the entire way through this final round, I still believe Silva, Paige, and Kristen could have been much more in the mix than they were, but somehow they just kept crumbling. It felt like they didn't capitalize on many of the opportunities that they had, and especially Silva, who came out on top with a 10 under in the first round. She was just not there today or yesterday. But man, Missy came out swinging, taking a big stroke swing with an early 3 birdies in the front 9. And it was clear that her putter was on today, making her entire round feel like she was truly in control. And I feel like this course lines up great for her game. She's really good at throwing the exact same looking shot again and again, and for some reason that actually lines up really well for this course. And so she can push for birdies when she needs to, but can take a par without feeling too bad about herself, leading to a lot of stroke separation, missing just one C1 putt the entire final round. And then you have Paige, who had a ton of holes just not look easy for her. Maybe she felt like she had to push despite being close. I don't really know. Even though she was only like 2 or 3 strokes back, it still felt like she was pushing but not really getting anywhere with it. So really the main person fighting against Missy was Kristen. And man, I cannot tell you how many birdie chances that she had that just did not go her way. And I feel like this is definitely an indicator that her game is just not where it needs to be. It is not just a couple of mishaps, it is happening again and again. And her decision making just doesn't look good. Missing all but one of her C2 putts this final round. And like I said, missing 23 C2 putts the entire weekend. So the Kristen that wins all the majors feels like a little bit absent right now, like her drive on hole 7. Like, just what is that? Now again, I want to reiterate, to me, she is still the best player of all time in FPL. Bar none. I do not think it's Paige. I do not think it's anybody else. I truly do not think anybody can rival Kristen, but for times like these, her ability to be an S tier pro falls short. And what's crazy is that even when she does have bad shots like hole 7's drive, she still birdies it because she can throw S tier up shots like it's nothing. But hole 8 was the absolute turning point of the whole event, where it looks like Missy was going to run away with it, and then she throws it right into the water, and Kristen is left with a very potentially gettable birdie look. Now she is a little pinched off behind a tree, but it's looking like, yeah, she can do this. She can definitely make this putt, which would have been a guaranteed 2-stroke swing. But like so many people this weekend, she makes a terrible wind read and it sails past the basket, nearing the OB, but not quite. And then on her comebacker, she kind of does the same thing. And then her comebacker also falls short, leading to a wild 4-putt. I do not remember the last time she has ever done a 4-putt. So in an insanely fast period of time, it went from her being just like 1 stroke behind to being close to like 4 or 5. And something about this moment makes you feel like you can definitely tell what's going on in her head, and that is low confidence. She looks frustrated. She looks like she's confused. It just felt like her certainty levels were just not there. But so right after that, when it's looking like Missy's going to run away with it, let's bring up Paige. Now after this hole, she's not really relevant, not really in contention, super not important. But on this very hole, she throws what has become the norm for Paige. She throws an absolutely insane throw-in for the eagle when you're in contention. Oh my goodness. Keeping the idea that goats are goats forever. Insane stuff. And so it becomes a battle. And so we get back to the real battle of Kristen versus Missy, which is hype, but definitely unexpected after Silva looked so dominant in the first couple of rounds. So hole 12 is where Missy starts to show that she is not playing it safe, and she is going to push, making an insanely good death putt to match Kristen. And then on 18, Missy goes out of bounds, and it seems like the stress might be getting to her a little bit, and Kristen scoops up an incredibly important turkey at this point, which included a crazy 47-footer, and it felt like, okay, Kristen could win this. And then hole 16 is where it all took a darker turn. She throws a quote-unquote foot fault. Do I believe it's a foot fault? Maybe, I don't know. Not really. It's close. Would I have called it? Hell no. But the real critical part about this rule is that you have no part of a supporting point touching your lie when you release the disc. If you just look at this rule, it could definitely be perceived as a foot fault, but when we're talking about fractions of a second in a sport where we almost never take things that seriously, it feels like it is almost certainly targeted. And so Missy takes a par and Kristen takes a bogey. It feels like one shot shouldn't matter, but man, did it matter for her game, because Kristen was totally tilted at this point, and Missy knew that she could kind of just coast. Now she did birdie 17, but it felt all so inconsequential, knowing that 17 and 18 probably could be a par and she still would have won. So overall, I know Missy is a great player, but I was just talking to other people and they have this similar sentiment where she's just not necessarily interesting in her playstyle. She is really good, she is amazing at circle 2 putts, but in my opinion, it feels like her wins always come from other players really falling short. Now, does that mean Missy's bad? No, she's a million times better than I could ever be. But I still feel like her wins are when other people crumble, and she's just playing her consistent game with very few faults, but also very few shots that feel insanely good. But I definitely have to eat my words a little bit on that, because she did go 10 under in round 3 with a 1038 rated round, which is definitely sick, to be fair. So with that said, big money Missy wins again, but damn does it feel like there's a little bit of an asterisk on it, even if there shouldn't be. So in conclusion, what did you guys think about the call? Do you feel like it was BS? Do you feel like we need to reinvent the rules? Personally, I believe if your plant foot does not touch the disc and then it touches it on release, you're good. And to me in a major, there needs to be marshals on every single card at all times, which I know would be hard, but it needs to be done to have fair and equitable calls being done. But I gotta say, for a golf course, it did not disappoint and was definitely not boring. So what do you guys think? I'd love to know. With that, Wild Run signing out. Hopefully my next major, which I think is Worlds, I'll be at. So that will be insane. But thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Wild Runs signing out. Peace.
Chasing a dream.